da-dum, da-dum,
Dum, dum,
I'm Tim.
I'm Chris.
I'm Sarah.
Y'all know us. Know how we earn a living. That's right, we're talking Jaws.
What we are dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine.
We're not only going to have to close the beach, we're going to have to hire somebody to kill the shark.
Bad fish, but I'll catch him and kill him.
Did you hear your father? Out of the water now!
This shark, swallow you whole.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
That's a little bit from the trailer, so once again, we're talking about a cinema classic here. So, you guys, what was the first way you experienced this movie?
God, I was about 5 years old. My father used to watch my brother and I when my mother did bingo on Wednesday nights with the private school my brother and I attended. And Dad would rent movies that he loved and movies he thought that we should see. And I may have been a little bit too young at 5 to see this movie because I didn't really ever want to go in any type of water, which I think was everybody's reaction when this movie first came out in theaters. But it's just always been my favorite. This and Ghostbusters. Ever since then, just I could watch it anytime it's on. I know it by heart.
Sarah?
This was my first time seeing it.
Really? Never seen any of it before?
We started watching it one night at like midnight, and I fell asleep, and Chris was brokenhearted and thought I didn't like it for the longest time.
It needs attention.
I was like, no, I'm just old and tired.
Yeah, it is one you need to really focus on.
This is actually my first time seeing it in a theater.
Yeah, we just came back from a screening at Cinema Salem on the big screen, and it is the best way to watch it, especially if you can find at least one person in the audience who's never seen it before and just watch their reaction. So in this case, it was easy for you.
It was easy for me, and actually the lady 2 people down from us, I don't know if she had never seen the movie before or if she was just easily spooked by it, because there was always a, oh! And then she'd grab her boyfriend's arm and like laugh.
The one next to me?
The one next to you, yeah.
But she would like jump a second before everyone else.
I was right next to somebody who'd seen it before, because every time one of the scary scenes would come up, I could feel her kind of wilt and pull into herself.
It's almost like the
happens.
woman next to me had seen it because she knew things were coming. And I'm like, how did she know? So I think maybe she had seen it, so she knew what was coming.
A lot of people have the movie memorized. I do. It's funny. I remember when I was a kid, just the reputation of the movie, I just knew it as this gory horror movie on the level of like Friday the 13th. It's this horrible thing that I'll probably, never get up the nerve to see. And then I was shocked to find that people I knew were in it, like Richard Dreyfuss, I knew him from Close Encounters, and Roy Scheider, and that Steven Spielberg, the guy who did E.T., directed this horrifying movie. And so when we finally got to watch it, it was on HBO in endless rotation when I was a kid. And this weird thing would happen where if it was playing in our household, everybody would eventually just congregate into the room where it was playing and would not leave until the end. You couldn't help it.
It's like a shrine.
Yeah, I mean, it just had this hypnotic effect on people. And no matter how many times I see it, it still does that. You can't help but get drawn into it. The movie was released on June 20th, 1975, made for a budget of $9 million, and over its existence, it's taken in $470 million.
Holy crap.
Granted, that's over 30 years, but even so, when it first came out, it was a monster hit. I mean, it was the biggest movie of all time.
The inventor of the blockbuster, right?
The inventor of the summer blockbuster, yeah. And it was also one of the most troubled productions of that era. I mean, I don't know how anybody didn't think, oh, we're going to be shooting a movie on the water with a mechanical shark. This will go great. This will be easy. And it was nothing but problems for almost the entire production time.
Well, and you think, countless documentaries have gone into this in depth, but, I think that's what really makes the movie shine. It has this reputation of being, a slasher movie with a shark. When someone describes it to you, that's the bits they remember, especially from the parents of ours that may have seen it in the summer of 75 when it came out. But the technical limitations are what make it a great movie. They had to sit down and go, we need something alluring. These actors really need to act. We really need a story here. We need the little bits in the bottom of the boat when they're sitting around at night with the sharing of the scars and Quint's story about the Indianapolis. And, all of that just makes it, one of the best films like this ever made. And it really kind of helped set Steven Spielberg's career in motion, right? This half of the camera angles, half of the way the character beats are all very much him for the rest of his career almost.
Yeah, this was only his third movie, his second theatrical movie, and nearly got fired almost the entire production because it was going so slow and there were so many problems. You had the weather.
Spielberg did?
Yeah, but this was a huge, huge break for him, and he managed to pull it off.
And he had done 2 before it.
But either of them was really like this. This level, this budget, this important.
What was before Jaws?
Duel, a TV movie, and the next one was the Sugarland Express.
What was Duel about?
Duel was about a guy who was terrorized by a truck, like a big 18-wheeler, on in the Midwest somewhere. It's really good.
It's great. And if you watch
really
it,
Sugarland Express was a train.
No, it was another chase movie about two parents who kidnapped their child that's been taken away from them by social services and lead the police on this cross-country chase. It had Goldie Hawn and William Atherton. Great little movie, but very different from the stuff he'd be doing later on. I mean, this set him on a whole different
And you look
course.
at Jaws in '75. I have the new Blu-ray and watching that at home, but to see this on a screen in a theater this first time and to kind of put myself back in the shoes of someone sitting in '75, this movie looks like it was made now. The way the camera moves, the way the shots were set up, this doesn't look like a movie that had limitations. This looked like a movie where they were able to just reach and do exactly what they wanted to do. And for a thing to be that troubled and then turn out that well is just a testament to everybody involved.
Just trying to imagine the continuity of trying to cut all those scenes on the water where the sky would change, the water quality would change, if it was stormy or if it was wavy or not. Yeah, I can imagine how difficult it was and how much footage they must have had to go through to get everything to match up correctly. It's, of course, based on the novel by Peter Benchley, which was also a big success. He actually later regretted writing it because it gave sharks a very bad reputation. And sharks don't really generally behave like the sharks we see in this movie. It's very, very rare that they go after people. But, I mean, it led to a lot of people hunting sharks and going, I'm going to defeat the big killer shark. And it's really much more the other way around, that people are the worst predator toward sharks than...
They talk about that a lot on Martha's Vineyard when the movie was filmed. We had the luxury, was it 2 summers ago?
Yeah.
Of going over to the vineyard, and we went on a bus tour where they talked about that's the beach where all the kids ran out when the little boy, what was his name?
Alex Kittner.
Alex Kittner got bit. And they actually said Alex Kittner still lives on the island, and
that's not character.
The actor that played him still lives on the island, and
Jeffrey Voorhees, I think.
And he helps promote a lot of they do the yearly shark fishing festival, but it changed from right after the movie came out and it started on the vineyard. It was like a big bloodthirsty, let's get him and kill him, and nowadays it's for the sport of sometimes it's just get the thing, get a picture, and let it go, kind of a thing. And Peter Benchley and the other folks that were kind of upset kind of spearhead that, into its existence. And it was just really interesting to go out there and kind of see how non-touristy they kind of make it. It comes up, but it's not like, come see where you filmed Jaws,
I read an interesting story. I don't know if it's true that Lee Fierro, who plays Mrs. Kittner, the mother, went to Martha's Vineyard, went in this restaurant and saw something on a menu of this restaurant that was like the Alex Kittner dish. And comment to the waiter that, I played the mother in that movie. So the manager of the place came out, and it was Jeffrey Voorhees who played her son, and it was the first time they had seen each other since the film.
That's fantastic.
I don't know if it's true. If it is, it's a great story.
That is cool.
All right, let's talk about the cast. First of all, Roy Scheider as Martin Brody. By that point, he was best known as Cloudy from The French Connection. That's the movie that kind of got Spielberg interested in casting him. He'd star in the sequel to this, as well as Marathon Man, Blue Thunder, 2010, and he'd work with Spielberg again on Sequest DSV. Spielberg
which was just a fantastic show.
Yeah, Spielberg was executive producer of that one. He's a great character because you need him. He's the everyman. He's the one anybody can relate to in this situation. The fish out of water, so to speak.
The one that's trying to do right and no one will let him.
Exactly.
And he comes with him so much unspoken, history, right? It's like, the reasons for not going in the water, he kind of just laughs it off, fear of drowning, this and that and the other thing. But it comes out when he's talking about when he was drunk in the scene with Hooper, how awful New York was, being afraid from his children.
I'm telling you, the crime rate in New York will kill you. There's so many problems, you never feel like you're accomplishing anything. Violence, rip-offs, muggings. Kids can't leave the house, you gotta walk them to school. But in Amity, one man can make a difference. In 25 years, there's never been a shooting or a murder in this town.
You almost get a vibe every once in a while that coming there wasn't necessarily what his wife really wanted to do. Like he says, take him home to New York, you mean? No, here. And it's like that first time where he really said, no, this is our home.
Yeah.
And things like that. And there's just so much backstory that we get in a teeny tiny little slice of the beginning of the movie of them interacting. Almost like they were getting kind of rocky. You want to get drunk and fool around, and there's kind of almost that laugh playing like, wow, we haven't really said that in a long period of time, almost. And it's It's like, wow, what's really going on here, you know?
Yeah, there's almost that sense that the city life was too rough, and him being a cop, he'd seen a lot of terrible stuff and figured Amity would be a nice, gentle place to raise the kids. He'd be chief of police, no big problems, no murders, no shootings or anything. And then this happens, and he has to deal with this horrible situation all of a sudden.
Right.
And also, the fact that he was in French Connection, it almost feels like it could be, well, it's not that character, obviously, but that same type of hard-bitten New York cop suddenly taken out of that environment and thrown in a completely different environment where he doesn't really fit in. He's not one of the islanders. He can't really relate to the rest of these people who are so concerned about the beaches and their bottom line. He's just thinking about people's safety and doing the right thing, and constantly getting shot down the whole way along.
Now, have you seen him in anything before, Sarah? Did you ever see Sequest? I figured you may have watched that because I had a talking dolphin.
Yeah.
And the kid from Sidekicks.
Oh, that's right. I'm trying to think of other things. He was in The Rainmaker, that legal drama with Matt Damon. He was a mobster in Romeo is Bleeding. I want to say there was one other big one he'd been in lately, or before he died. He died 2008, I want to say.
Really?
Yeah,
You know,
unfortunately, cancer.
Brilliantly cast. I mean, you're like the fish out of water thing is just perfect. And he was just young enough, but just old enough, you know what I mean, to be like the family man with the kids, but it wasn't like, you know, oh, I'm too old for this crap kind of a character. It was like almost like, oh man, you almost have a little, when they're first on the boat, there's a bit of excitement to him, you know, getting the gear and going and helping with the stuff. And
it seems at times like he feels like he has to prove himself.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, especially with Quint.
Yeah, exactly. There's this definite kind of masculinity, and you'd see that with Hooper and Quint too. These two guys trying to constantly one-up each other, and Brodys always bringing up the rear and feeling silly. I mean, he's on the boat with Hooper wearing his life preserver the entire time. Little details
It's
like
like
that.
you brought your rubbers.
He has life jacket on the wall? Some of it.
Well, when he's on the boat at night when they're looking for
Yeah.
the Gardner's boat.
When he was the drunken boat search.
Oh, right.
Interesting that he was well cast, but he wasn't the first. Spielberg offered it to Robert Duvall, because Duvall had been a big proponent of him doing the movie, but Duvall didn't really feel like it would be the right role for him, or that would make him too famous, because he figured this movie would be a hit. And Charlton Heston had been interested in playing the part, and Spielberg shot him down because he figured if anyone
Too many guns.
Well, no, if anyone sees Charlton Heston versus the shark, they're not going to think the shark has a chance. I mean, the shark's not going to kill Moses. He'll just part the water and shoot him.
Right, it's very, even seeing it now, you get a little bit of like, these guys are going to make it? You know?
Well, especially Brody, who's like the least aggressive and seems like the
And
least
he's
tough
stuck
of
on
these
his own.
groups. Yeah. Next is Richard Dreyfuss as Matt Hooper. Before this, he had been in American Graffiti for George Lucas, and I think that Lucas probably suggested that he might be good for this part. Initially, he turned it down, though, because he thought it's going to be a great movie, but a movie that's going to be terrible to film. And, well, he was right about that. And then he did The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz and thought his performance in that was so terrible, he's like, please give me the job. And, of course, he'd work with Spielberg again on Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Always, and later win an Oscar for The Goodbye Girl.
Close Encounters would be a really good CinemaSpection.
Oh, we'll get to that one eventually, I'm sure. Hooper's a great character because he's both the brains of the operation, at least in the scientific sense, and also the comic relief.
Yes.
And
normally,
character.
Yeah. And normally, right, you get the goofy scientist also being, you know, the driving character, the one that actually does know what's going on. Sometimes that doesn't play all that well. You either get that it's too goofy and they're a bumbling fool, or they're too serious and the goofiness almost seems kind of forced. And it just works spot on with this guy.
But also there's that idea that you sometimes see a scientist in this movie is like, no, we can't kill it, we have to study it, we have to catch it. And while I love that we see his fascination with this, he thinks this animal is beautiful, he also realizes, no, we have to kill it. He's smart enough when it comes to sharks to know when they should be afraid.
I don't think either one of you are familiar with our problems.
I think that I am familiar with the fact that you are going to ignore this particular problem until it swims up and bites you on the ass. Now, wait a second.
Chief.
There are two ways to deal with this problem. You're either going to kill this animal or you're going to cut off its food supply.
Larry,
He's just so charismatic, and I love watching it again, especially the little quiet friendship that develops between him and Brody. Like the moment where Mrs. Kittner comes on the dock and slaps him and, you know, delivers this speech about, you know, how he knew that there was danger and let people go swimming anyway, and it's because of him that her sons died. And Brody walks away, and we cut to this great reaction shot of Hooper watching him go and feeling sympathy, and the next scene is him showing up at his house with 2 bottles of wine.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and what I like about that too is more about the character, right? He shows up with the 2 bottles of wine, obviously, like so many other very intelligent, socially awkward people I know, because that's just what you do. And then doesn't really know what to do after that. He kind of puts them on the table. He actually takes, is anyone eating this? He takes Brody's food. And it's just so...
I thought he was coming in with the wine to celebrate because he was going to say they found body parts in the shark as he cut it open on his own.
That's actually a good direction
That's
that
where
could have
I
gone.
thought the direction it was going, and I'm like, nah.
But also, there's sense of meticulousness that he doesn't know what they're eating, so he brings red and white, both.
But also, am I going to come over at dinner time? That seemed kind of late. You know what I mean? So it's like, did you just assume?
Well, you could also look at it as he's trying to subtly bribe Brody into letting him cut open the shark. Because
Right.
he brings it up in the middle of the dinner, too. Which I wanted to prove by cutting shark open, and like a leading thing of, can we do this? I also love that he refers to him as the only other rational man on the island.
Yeah, you'll be the only rational man on the island left when I leave.
He recognizes that this guy has got his head on straight and knows what has to be done.
Yeah.
And finally, we come to my favorite, Robert Shaw as Quint. Oh my God, what a great character.
Farewell and adieu to you old Spanish ladies.
It's like the Captain Ahab of the movie, and he's both really fun and really intimidating, too.
Yes. And you get, I mean...
Very mysterious character.
Yeah, we all get this sense of this horrible stuff he's gone through, and we slowly get more of it as the movie goes on as to what it was specifically, but at first you just know, this guy's a badass, you don't want to mess with him.
Yeah.
I love the whole town knows him, too. The mayor, you know, kind of has that half, oh, don't even listen to a word this guy's saying, and the other half of, be afraid, get him out of here, tell him whatever we need to tell him.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't shoot him down like, oh, we'll take it under advisement, please don't hurt us.
Yeah, please don't hurt me, don't twist my arm and push me into a locker.
I could see him playing a really good pirate.
Yeah, and he almost does to some degree in this one. He feels like a pirate at points. Robert Shaw is also known from Russia with Love, the James Bond movie, where he played Grant, the agent Spectre. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite Bond villains. He has that great fight scene on the train. He was Doyle Lonnegan in The Sting, another great bad guy he is.
The Sting!
He was also the head thief in The Taking of Pelham 123, the original one, the part that John Travolta would massacre in the horrible remake.
Yeah.
Did I see that?
No.
That's a good one.
I think
The original is really good. The remake's not so good. It's one of the few Tony Scott movies I really just didn't like.
Yeah, me too. He was Henry VIII in A Man for All Seasons. And Mossad agent Kabakov, in Black Sunday, really scary terrorism suspense movie.
Did you see the new Pelham 123?
No.
No.
You could just tell that Travolta was not good in it.
He hams it up. And he'd also pop up in the film version of The Deep, also from Peter Benchley book.
Yeah.
It was originally offered to Lee Marvin, who passed on it. Again, he just didn't really think this was the kind of movie he wanted to do. They tried to cast Sterling Hayden, but he had problems with the IRS. They were taking a levy on all the money he'd make from acting. And they tried to figure out a way to work around it to get him in the part, but they couldn't quite get it to work. And Shaw himself still had some IRS problems when he was making this. Every time they weren't shooting, he'd have to shoot off to Canada or somewhere out of the country, because he could only spend a certain amount of time in America. Another problem, he drank a lot on the set, and it would cause big problems.
I can imagine. Now, wasn't he kind of uncredited with helping with a lot of the script?
He was. He was actually an author and a playwright.
Yeah.
Wrote the play The Man in the Glass Booth. And it came to the Indianapolis speech. The nominal screenwriter Carl Gottlieb tried it, couldn't get it to work. Howard Sackler had been brought in to try it. John Milius, the screenwriter who did Conan the Barbarian, or directed that one, I should say, and wrote Apocalypse Now, he tried to get it together, and Shaw basically took all their stuff, cut it down, rearranged it, put some of his own stuff in, and that's the speech as we see it in the movie. And everyone agreed his version was perfect.
1,100 men went into the water. Vessel went down in 12 minutes. Didn't see the first shark for about half an hour. Tiger, 13-footer. You know that when you're in the water, Chief? You tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail.
Yeah, it just kills.
There's actually quite a bit of improvised dialogue in the movie, as we'll get to in a bit. But the drinking caused him to have this major rivalry with Richard Dreyfuss. Whenever he was sober, Roy Scheider would say he was like the most professional actor, great. One drink, and he'd just go nuts. To the point where he, at one point, said, I wish I could quit drinking. Dreyfuss took his drink, well, here, I'll help you. Threw it off the boat, and Shaw basically nearly killed him.
Wow.
And the first time they tried to film the Indianapolis speech, Shaw, because, they're supposed to be drinking in the scene, got drunk. And he did the speech and just couldn't get through it. And eventually it morphed into this long monologue about his career and all the things that had gone wrong with it. And it just went through the whole 10-minute take that they were filming with. And eventually the DP had to go, we're out of film. And Shaw came back the next day, apologized profusely to Spielberg, and did the whole scene in one take.
Wow.
Next we have Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody.
Yes.
She was actually the first person cast. Spielberg saw her in a Kojak TV movie and loved her and said, I want her. Which caused a bit of a problem. She was actually the wife of the president of Universal, Sid Sheinberg, so that was great. But Daryl Zanuck, the producer, wanted his wife at the time, who's Linda Harrison from Planet of the Apes, she played Nova, wanted her to get the part. And when she didn't, Sheinberg arranged it so she would have a part in Airport 1975. So everybody was happy with that. Gary would return for Jaws 2, and unfortunately Jaws the Revenge. But
let's never speak of that again.
Yeah, probably best to leave it alone.
Inflatable blow-up floating shark. It's all I think of when I think. It's what it looks like.
It does.
It just looks like
Just
an
this
inflatable.
drifting-
I don't know why, but her character bugged me.
Really?
In what way?
I don't know, just she seemed very distant as a mother. Like there didn't seem to be a whole lot of motherly love in her.
We don't get very many scenes with her and the kids. It's
And the one of the few, it just, I don't know, like she wasn't cold, but it just didn't seem like they both seemed very distant from the kids.
Well, maybe
Like,
that plays into. It's a good point, kind of what I was saying earlier. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe it's all part of that uprooting. Like if you notice on the beach. The morning that Alex Kittner is killed, she's on the beach talking to the mothers and everything, and she's kind of trying to fit in. And
Listen, all I want to know, I just want to know one simple thing. When do I get to become an islander?
Ellen, never. Never. You're not born here, you're not an islander. Maybe that's it.
She gets this like offended look of, oh, I guess I just don't fit in here. And
I guess there were points
and
when I thought she was like just his mistress.
Well, and again, and you know,
that was when he's getting in the trunk at the beginning of the movie. Something that was said, I don't remember what it was, led me to believe, and I was like, wait, is that his mistress? Is that his wife?
Well, and again, you get, they wake up in the morning and the kids are already outside playing.
And he doesn't even like kiss her goodbye when they leave.
Well, it's almost like they've slid into this part of their marriage where the passion's kind of dulled down a little bit, and we see her trying to kind of bring it back, like the scene where she's given in the back rub, or just talking about getting drunk and fooling around.
Well, and they're all also both on completely different pages, right? I mean, even with the shark, she's like, well, you're going to get yourself all bent out of shape. The kid's playing on the boat, and then she looks at the book, and it's like, I get exactly why he's afraid. And it's like, all of a sudden they have things to connect with again. Mm-hmm. And she can kind of back him up in this, this fight to kind of take control over his position in the island, and then he's just off running away again, and you're right, you never really get that scene of them coming together.
Well, I think we do. It's right before he leaves on the boat.
Yes.
That moment of, he's trying to focus on mundane stuff like don't use the fireplace in the living room, and we see that she is terrified for him. And
so terrified that she runs.
Yeah, they have that moment where they hug right there, and she thinks it could be the last time she ever sees him.
And Quint goes and bullies him into getting on the boat, and he grabs her and holds her even tighter for another few seconds. Yeah, you're right. That's a really good point, though, Sarah.
Yeah, it is. Next we have Murray Hamilton as Mayor Vaughn. He was actually the only actor who was the first choice for the role. He's great as the mayor. He's just, on the one hand, you despise him, but later on you get to see kind of a different side to him, the guilt that he carries once everything goes wrong, that I think makes him a very
But he still doesn't want to go ahead and sign the thing. He's still like, but it...
Well, because he thinks it's admitting defeat, or like by admitting to everybody that he made a mistake. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because he has this scumminess to him at the beginning, and then in that instant in the hospital, he's immediately made into a human character.
What? August. What are you talking about? Larry, the summer is over. You're the mayor of Shark City. These people think you want the beaches open.
I was acting in the town's best interest.
That's right. You were acting in the town's best interest, and that's why you're going to do the right thing. That's why you're going to sign this, and we're going to pay that guy what he wants.
Martin. My kids were on that beach too.
And that one cigarette he's always holding never lit the whole time. He's got it lit. Mm-hmm. And he's just shaking, and it's like, I get this guy completely now.
Yeah, he suddenly realizes he could have got his own kids killed in that moment.
But yet he still won't do anything about it. He still won't.
He signs it.
It's just
he's at that crossroads.
But he's still like, no, we don't need to do that. It's fine. It's fine.
Well, he also have to look at it from his point of view. They're about to pay $10,000, which is
to the idiot drunken town fish pirate.
This on top of them losing pretty much all their summer revenue at this point. This is going to be a major.
He's damning the career of everybody on the island.
Yeah, it's a major financial hit to the community once he does that. But also, if you look at it from his point of view, he's thinking he's got to protect the community. That if they don't have a good summer, like Quinn says, they might be on welfare. He figures, all right, this is just a one-time incident. It's one shark. It had a bite. Maybe it swims off. Maybe it was a boating accident. You get the sense he's actually trying to convince himself that's the case.
He's trying to convince everybody else.
I love also the interview he's giving on the beach, where he spins it to, from shark attacks to the large predator that supposedly injured some bathers rather than tore them to pieces. Hamilton was also Mr. Robinson in The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman, and popped up in The Hustler with Paul Newman. He'd work again with Spielberg in 1941 as well. And he was also in the comedy Hysterical. He actually played a spoof of his part in this movie.
Really?
Which I remember seeing as a kid and thinking really funny. I get the sense it probably wouldn't hold up if I watched it again. And that brings us to the man himself, Steven Spielberg. So as we said, he had directed Duel and Sugarland Express before this. I remember reading that after this movie was a big hit, he still didn't really quite get a lot of the respect he deserved because, A, a lot of people attributed the effectiveness of the movie to Verna Fields, who was the editor, and an expert editor. A lot of people figured, well, she probably did most of the really heavy work in making this movie work. To the point where he invited a camera crew to film him when the Oscar nominations were announced because he was sure he was going to get a Best Director Oscar nomination.
Yeah, I read this.
And didn't, and was just crestfallen. And he had a couple knocks to his ego. This, and most especially in 1941 after that, I think were probably healthier for him in the long run. But
yeah, he refers to them both as his Vietnam. I have a book, a little anthology book about him, and that's just... There is Vietnam, and then you get to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where they say, can you say something good about the movie? And he says, it created the PG-13.
And he met his wife.
Which I still love Temple of Doom.
What did she do on the movie?
She's Kate Capshaw, who was that female lead.
She was the lead in Temple of Doom.
Oh, right, and her daughter was the one in Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
This movie also started a tradition for him. Because the production was so fraught with problems, the last day he was dressed in a nice suit, hoping it would mean the crew wouldn't grab him and throw him into the water. When they were done with the last shot he had to film, he jumped immediately on a boat, motored for the shore, and announced that he would not be returning, and got on a plane and got out. And he also wasn't present for the last shot of the shark blowing up. And that became a tradition with him. He was never around for the last shot of his movie. He thought it was a good luck thing.
Oh.
And watching the movie, you see a lot of the common themes that crop up in his work. The everyman pitted against or experiencing something extraordinary.
Children in peril.
Children in peril. He's got the Hitchcockian talent for generating suspense, which, as you mentioned, a lot of that came out of necessity when the shark didn't work.
Uses a lot of Hitchcock invented camera angles. In
yeah, the vertigo shot there on the beach.
The vertigo shot on the beach.
Where
that's when you pull back and zoom in at the same time, or pull in and zoom out at the same time. So the camera is always framed the same around someone, but the background appears to shrink or expand. When the shark is eating Alex Kittner, they look at Brody, or is it Brody's wife?
No, it's Brody.
Brody, and the thing does the whoop, where the background looks like it's fading out.
This movie also starts one of his famous visual tropes with people staring at things, often with flashlights.
Often with flashlights. Oh, and the lighting through fog.
Yep.
It's a good thing he was shooting on the water.
And looking at this, he mentioned that Jurassic Park is sort of the spiritual sequel to this movie, and you can definitely see it. There's a lot of similarities to it.
A lot of similarities in the pacing. You get the, barely seeing the T-Rex that doesn't show up.
And this idea of nature versus commerce is something that is not going to pay attention to how somebody wants to make their living or what's economically good for all the humans. It's just going to smash through barriers and cause all sorts of problems, and you're just going to have to deal with it. The script was by Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb. Benchley, the author of the book, he wrote several drafts of the script that were rejected and clashed with Spielberg on a lot of things, especially the ending. Due to the reduced pre-production time, because they were trying to get it filmed in the season the right time, they didn't really have the time to finish the script, so a lot of times they were writing scenes at night after they had finished filming for the day.
That's amazing.
Which led to a lot of improvisation, but also a lot of really great stuff. Like little scenes like Brody and his son at the table when the kid is imitating him, which is a beautiful little character moment that you don't usually see in a blockbuster. The movie doesn't usually stop to have that kind of moment.
It was such a wonderful scene, and it's right after Alex Kittner died. So, when I need a kiss, the kid, well, why? He goes, because I need it. You know what I mean? And it's like, it says so much, and it also ties in a little bit to what Sarah was saying, is you don't really see him react with any of his children in the movie till that moment. It's like it draws him right back in to what's important.
Well, especially because it's going to come up later with his other son once he's threatened by the shark and
That's right.
It becomes personal. And the scenes in the boat where they're having their sing-along and the Scar comparison, great little moments like that came out of it.
Well, and getting to write it, while you're making the movie, while you're in the settings, while you're with the actors, while you're on the sets, that helps it tie in so much more, and I bet from what I had heard, a lot of the extras, a lot of the secondary people are all just locals, and that helps Brody's character seem like that more of an outsider, because if you would cast a person as Chief Brody, kind of like with a Tom Hanks in Catch Me If You Can, trying to fake the Boston accent, it never works. And so having him be a guy that just doesn't sound like that around all these people, it helps sell it, I think.
And we get his attempt at the accent with the even the not too far from the cat. There's a lot of differences from the book, which I think all of them improve the movie immeasurably. The book, if you read it, it's a lot more focused on all the problems that result from the shark attacks rather than the shark attacks themselves. Like the economic side and what's happening to the town is a lot more the focus, and we actually get a little more motivation for the mayor and why he wants to keep the beaches open, because in the book there's actually mobsters who are involved in Amityville's real estate, and they have their own interests in making sure that the summer is successful and then he makes a lot of money. Also, there was an affair between Hooper and Ellen Brody in the book.
Yep.
And it brings it into much more of a soap opera kind of direction. Brody himself is a lot less likable. He's practically an alcoholic in the book, and that distance in the marriage we were kind of talking about becomes much more of an issue there.
Wow.
It just makes it harder to like anybody.
And you eventually came in on the screenplay. Probably why there's a dual credit then, huh?
Yeah, like they didn't use very much of his scripts, but he still gets the credit anyway. And he actually pops up in the movie as the reporter.
But in recent days, a cloud has appeared on the horizon of this beautiful resort community. A cloud in the shape of a killer shark.
Spielberg has a cameo too, actually, on the radio there when he reports that Ellen's trying to contact Brody on the Orca. And
that was Spielberg?
Yeah.
Spielberg's voice, yeah.
I did not know that.
Some of the other changes, Hooper originally died in the book and was going to in the movie. And supposedly one of the reasons why they spared him was a complete accident while they were filming live-action shark footage. To do the scene in the shark cage, they got a miniature cage, so a normal-sized shark would look large next to it. Got a little person in the cage and just filmed the shark. Kind of, we see some shots of it passing around it and stuff. The little person eventually just got freaked out and did not want to go back in the cage, and they got him out. While they were getting it out, the shark hit the cage and got lodged in the top of it and started thrashing around, which we see in the movie.
And it's such a good shot.
It's an amazing shot and destroys the cage, but of course Hooper's not in it. And so it caused Spielberg to kind of reconsider and have Hooper escape from the top so they could use the footage.
Yeah.
Was it a real shark?
That was a real shark for those shots, yeah.
Never when it was directly messing with the cage while you saw Hooper in it. That was always the puppet or the mechanical shark. But when they cut to long shots of the thing thrashing around with the cage and swimming by it, it was always a real shark.
Which brings up a bit of a flub since you see that doesn't have the barrels attached to him in those
Well,
scenes,
yes,
but
they did a good enough job. There's actually another flub I caught in the scene when Quint is pushing the boat to basically to overheating when the shark is chasing them. You can see the tow line because they were just towing the barrels with the boat at that point. You can see it kicking up and out of the water, and I'm like, oh, I wish I hadn't seen that.
I noticed in the scene where the
Because
shark...
I asked you about it, you said they were towing the shark because you had just caught the...
Yeah, and you can also...
They weren't supposed to be towing anything.
Right,
No, just
right.
the shark
But
chasing
you
them.
can also see every once in a while wake of the boat that they have that's pulling the
escaped
barrel.
from the side, not the top.
The top. He escaped from the top
But the
part.
shark was stuck to the top.
No, right after he escaped, the shark had stuck to the top.
Also, I noticed when they have it tied to the back and the shark is dragging the boat, you can see a very thick cable just under the surface attached to, I assume, like the bottom of the boat, just to yank it back.
Right.
With the weight covers it so you don't really notice it.
I'm glad you mentioned that story about the cage because I was thinking, how the hell did it not eat him? It basically had his mouth on him. He should have been eaten.
Well, you do see him also stabbing at it with the
Yeah,
knife.
but then
to keep it
I'm
back.
guessing the stabbing was enough.
Well, and you think, going
Are they
back...
supposed to get it in the eye?
He tried to. I mean,
Yeah.
it's also a very big shark. He probably couldn't get his arm around the nose.
Catch-
They say in those kind of situations, what you want to do is punch the shark on the nose.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the nose is very sensitive, and it's one of its most powerful sense organs. So.
Going back to the flubs, watching the shots in this movie, the things they pull off with that mechanical shark and with just the interactions in the water, that is nowhere near an easy thing to film at all. And the fact that they pull them off a lot of the time with very wide angles, it's just beautiful, incredible.
And again, we're seeing like the best of because they had tons and tons
Right.
of takes where the shark didn't work, the shark would stop.
Exactly.
They designed multiple sharks. One was just the sea sled shark, which was just one they attached to a boat line and dragged around for when it didn't have to move very much, but just slid through the water. Several mechanical ones, one with the guts open on the right side so they could shoot it from the other side, and the opposite for different angles. Robert Matty was the effects guy who built the shark. Excellent effects guy, but the problem is when they tested it in the freshwater tank at Universal Studios. Once they brought it out to the salt water, the salt got into all the workings and...
Lying on the bottom of Nantucket Sound.
Yeah, the first time they brought it out, the shark just sank.
No one's tried to find it.
Oh, no, they got it back, but that was the whole joke. Where's the shark today? Lying on the bottom of Nantucket Sound.
And that caused a lot of major rewrites. Originally, we were going to see the shark in the opening scene with the girl just heave out of the water and grab her. But because they couldn't, it made the film that much better that the shark is introduced to us in tiny little bits.
And this is where you should tell your story about that scene with the girl being gay.
Oh, right. So that's right, Sarah. So that scene, and Tim, you can verify this or not. I'm sure, but I believe this is correct. That the scene at the very beginning, the girl getting thrashed around, the very first tug, from what I've heard, was Spielberg.
I haven't heard that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I had read that he snuck under the water when they started filming the scene with the scuba mask on and gave the first tug. Because they said we're just going to film and get the shot set up, because they actually had her in a harness thrashing her around for later. But that first one is the general reaction of, why did something just grab me in the fucking water? You know, and
watching
Someone
that.
fact check IMDb.
I also heard that it dislocated her hip.
Well, she said later on that wasn't true. That, I mean, she is acting, that she's not actually in pain during that scene. But she was in a harness with ropes going off to two different sides of the beach with a bunch of guys in weights pulling her left and right to thrash her left and right during the scene. Watching that scene again, it reminded me a lot of one of the scenes from Creature from the Black Lagoon, where Julie Adams is swimming in the lagoon and the gill man just taps her on the foot, and she has that same first reaction of, whoa, what was that? In fact, one of the sound effects, the sound effect when the shark finally blows up and you hear that dinosaur-type roar, comes from that movie.
Which also was partially used in Duel.
That's right.
And then partially used for the T-Rex
Is that
in
like
Jurassic
another
Park.
Wilhelm scream kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
An animal version, I guess you could say.
And there aren't any Wilhelm screams in this movie.
No, they're not.
Oh, I was just thinking that too. But then I was thinking maybe it wasn't around yet.
I think wasn't.
Oh, it's been around, but
yeah.
It didn't really become popular again, I think, until like Star Wars. Lucas used it.
Lucas used it, overused it, I should say. Well, here's a good trivia bit. The name of the mechanical shark was referred to as Bruce, like an Electric Light Orchestra song, and
well, named for Spielberg's lawyer at the time.
That's right. And the name of the shark fish are not food. Their friends Finding Nemo was Bruce.
That's
which
right.
was in homage to this.
Although the crew had another name for it, Flaws.
Yeah.
Yes. That is fantastic.
Oh, I believe Spielberg would occasionally refer to it as the big floating turd.
Big floating turd. That's awesome.
That led to that famous phrase, the shark is not working, which is what they'd hear on the radios all through the island when they were trying to film, until finally, the shark is working, and everybody would run over to finally get their shots that they need.
There's an amazing picture of Spielberg sitting in the mouth of the mechanical shark with like a glass of champagne in his hand.
Was the first one they caught a real one, or was that fake too?
The tiger shark was supposedly a real one that was caught in Florida. And the problem was it hadn't been stored properly, so it was getting pretty rank by the time they filmed that scene. A lot of the internal organs started to slide down into the mouth, so it was really tough, supposedly, for the actors to get through the scene without just gagging.
When he's going through it, pulling the stuff, I don't know if it's the same animal that he's cutting open.
That would probably be a dummy, right?
That was probably a dummy for those scenes, yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, because he was like having issues with the smell.
But if you watch when it's hoisted up, you can actually see flies are all over it, so it does give it that extra little tinge of authenticity.
I just noticed that looked pretty freaking real.
Something we haven't talked about yet, but we seem to talk about in each of these, is the score. I mean, we could talk all day long about John Williams, but I mean, come on. We opened the podcast with the score, and I mean, we were talking about this.
One of the most famous ones.
Yeah. I mean, you hear those two notes, and you know it instantly.
The score is amazing in this movie because it can jump right from being a horror score into being, as Sarah said, it almost sounds like a Disney theme park. When everyone's arriving on Amity.
Over some of the scariest scenes.
Yep, also, yeah.
Which is so weird because you're seeing them like fighting the shark, but it's got this happy Disney movie.
Williams supposedly said that what he felt those scenes needed was pirate music. Like something from an old Errol Flynn pirate kind of movie. And yeah, it almost lulls you into this false sense of security that, they're fighting the shark, they're going to get it, they're in charge, they can take the shark. And as it turns, and the shark turns the tables on them, and the score changes again and gets darker and more ominous, it's fantastic. Also, you'll notice he never uses the shark theme when the shark isn't on screen. Like when those two kids have the fake cardboard fin and are scaring everybody, no music.
Right.
So subconsciously you know it's not the shark.
Wow, I didn't even notice that.
Neither did I.
But as soon as you hear the music, you know, okay, it's nearby somewhere.
And, more brilliant ways, tying in from the music and ways to know the shark was there. We spend, 20, 30 minutes of this movie chasing barrels. And those barrels, I mean, it's, it can be a completely happy scene. Then they cut to the outside of the boat and one of the barrels pops. And they got the shit's about to hit the fan now. All you need to do is see those damn barrels. And, I mean, the way of tying things to the shark, to know that it's at the dock.
The dock, which is an incredibly suspenseful scene, and you don't see the shark anywhere.
It's incredible. And you don't even know how big the damn shark is yet at that point.
Mm-hmm. But it's amazing watching this with an audience as we just did. You can see the scares all still really work.
Oh yeah, people are just drawn to it. They can't take their eyes away.
Well, especially the scene where they encounter Ben Gardner's boat and find his, well, at least his head.
That is the best scare in the movie.
Yeah,
that is the best scare in the movie.
Supposedly, when it was first shot, it wasn't filmed that way. It was Hooper just kind of shines his flashlight and it just passes over it, and you see it that way. And Spielberg felt he could do better with that one, and he put up his own money, went into his editor's swimming pool, added some milk so it looked a little bit more like the ocean, and reshot the scare to get that moment where the head just pops right out of the hole. And it worked, but the problem is it detracted from the scare later when the shark pops up next to the boat and scares Brody because people were a little bit more on edge. So that one got less screams, but...
Oh, the one on the boat's a great one, too. And that's the classic, we're going to need a bigger boat line. And then I love later, you called in, they're going to send a bigger boat, right?
Why is that the classic line? I would think smile, you son of a bitch. I would think that would be the classic line. No, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Well, it says everything about how fearsome this shark is that we're going to need more.
We are completely unprepared.
It's also ad-libbed by Roy Scheider. That was not in the script. He came up with that on the fly.
That just walk back into the cabin completely terrified.
Not even looking at Quint, just kind of staring off into space.
Yeah, we're going to need a bigger boat. Oh, shot reused at the beginning of 1941.
Oh, that's right, with the same actress.
Same actress, but then she gets lifted up on a periscope, right? Which is one of the only funny bits in that movie.
Yeah.
I still like the movie, but...
What was the same scene, though?
So, 1941 is a comedy, quote-unquote, about World War II that Spielberg made, and he had an all-star comedic cast, John Belushi, John Candy, all those guys.
Wasn't that one of the movies he didn't like that he
Yeah, and it's not very well received. And the opening is that same girl in the same scene, the skinny dipping scene, and you hear the Jaws music and everything.
Actress?
Same actress.
Same actress.
But she, instead of getting attacked by a shark, gets lifted up out of the water on a giant submarine periscope. It's because we're being invaded by Japan, right? It was a little silly. It's really the only bit that works in the whole movie. But.
Well, let's talk about the legacy of this movie, because this inspired so many kind of rip-offs and a whole kind of subgenre of nature gone amok.
And really quick, Jaws 2, which is still a decent little movie. It's nowhere in comparison to this, but it's amazing that movie is really the movie that this one gets sold as, right? You think teenagers on boats in peril, the slasher shark is chasing them around, and this movie isn't that at all. It has those bits, but it's a male bonding movie, and it's a movie about parents and their kids, and it's a movie about town politics, and it's there's so much more to it. And Jaws 2 is, no, it's a shark killing people, but it's still going to be a lot of fun. And
it does have some interesting things. Scheider was kind of contractually obliged to do it. He didn't want to. Dreyfuss and Spielberg were busy with Close Encounters, so they were off the hook. But I do think Scheider brings an interesting quality to Brody in that one.
Spielberg didn't do the second one.
No. He didn't really want to anyway, but Scheider, even though he's forced to do it, he brings an interesting quality to Brody, where by that one it's traumatized Brody, where he's so convinced another shark is back, he starts acting insane.
I love the red herring, or blue fish herring bit in that movie, where he's up on these, convinced that he sees another giant shark, and it's just a school of bluefish.
And starts blasting away
and the kids
water.
are jumping out of the way of the bullets, and he's...
Was this in the second one?
The second one, yeah. And I love that he at least now has a more... Like, you can tell the events of this movie have given him more tools.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's got, actual boats that are correct for patrolling the harbor and protecting things. And it's an interesting... They built on it fairly well.
Yeah, I thought so.
It's a silly movie.
It obviously doesn't hold a candle to this, but taken on its own merits, it's not bad.
And the shark just always looked weird in movie number 2 to me.
Well, he has that big burn on his face.
And halfway through, from the boat accident.
And we have Jaws 3, the one set in SeaWorld with Dennis Quaid and Leah Thompson and Lou Gossett Jr. And
horrible.
The 3D one, where the slow-moving shark is slowly coming at camera.
Is the fourth one?
The third one is Jaws 3D. And then Jaws the Revenge is the fourth one with the inflatable shark.
So there's Jaws 2, Jaws 3D, and Jaws
the Revenge is so bad.
For which they brought back Lorraine Gary. Lance Guest took over as the son. Michael Caine pops up in it. By then, Roy Scheider is definitely out, and they actually kill off his character.
Roy Scheider shows up in the repeat of the wife doing the smile you son of a bitch bit.
Yeah, so she has a flashback to a scene she's not present.
Yeah, what the fuck?
And by then, it's like a vendetta against the Brody family with these sharks. They're following them around the world to kill them.
It's so bad.
But for other movies that this inspired, there was the terrible Italian octopus movie Tentacles.
Orca!
I mean, right off the name of the boat there.
Orca's so good. Same movie, killer whale.
Except in that case, you're on the whale's side.
Yes. Yeah, the people suck in Orca.
With Richard Harris as this guy who kills this whale's mate and its baby, and the whale starts chasing him around and basically trying to lure him out into a confrontation on the water.
It's fucking it's so grim.
It's really silly and ridiculous, but
that's the
kind
incredible
of marvelous.
jumping killer whale.
Well, the scene where they're like in the Arctic and he jumps on an iceberg, much like the shark in this movie does on the Orca, and has Harris sliding toward his mouth, is just so insane but fun.
Another good puppet in that one. The Orca in that was really well done.
Or the wonderful scene where it pops up and the eye focuses on Richard Harris and then it swims back down. There's that moment of, I have marked you, sir. I'm coming back for you.
You are fucked. Have a nice day.
In terms of more of a spoof, we have Joe Dante's Piranha.
Woohoo!
Which is, again, utterly ludicrous, but a lot of fun.
And James Cameron's Piranha 2, Electric Boogaloo.
What?
Yes, the man that made Avatar made a Roger Corman movie.
Well, halfway. He got
That's
fired
a real
midway through
movie,
it.
Piranha 2.
No, Piranha 2 is a
Piranha
real
2
movie.
Flying Fish.
Yeah,
It's very silly. And then there was the Piranha 3D reboot.
Piranha 3 Double D.
Which has Richard Dreyfuss pretty much reprising his role as Hooper in the opening scene.
Yep.
Like I said, Jurassic Park takes a lot of the same techniques and themes from this one. It's just more Jaws on land. But there's just a ton of... Anaconda is another one.
I love Anaconda. It's so bad. Anaconda is one of the few movies that has the most blatant waterfall showing that they filmed the scene in reverse sequences.
For me, it's John Voight as sort of this Quint-like character with the worst South American accent ever.
I love when the snake spits him out and he winks.
Which is funny because he was another candidate for the role of Brody too.
Oh well.
But yeah, that movie's just
Anaconda's ridiculous.
But I mean,
Blake Placid takes the comedic approach.
Yep. And there you have.
If I had a dick, this is about the time I tell you to suck it.
There you have Oliver Platt as sort of the Hooper character, who is in that case the guy who doesn't want to kill the croc but wants to capture it. Almost any killer animal movie like this. Tremors. Is another one. Yep. Where you have it on the land, basically.
The Hooper character is the girl.
Yep, and Michael Gross is sort of the Quint with all the gun collection and the militarized lifestyle. But it's also interesting to note that before this movie, summer was a downtime for movies. People didn't go. They went to the beaches, or outside
and this
somewhere.
movie did a good job of setting up extra summers worth of people seeing movies because they didn't want to go in the water.
Exactly. I mean, when they saw...
This summer, it's not safe to go in the water.
When the test screenings happened and they saw how well this was playing, Universal ponied up like $700,000 for TV promotion, which was unheard of at the time, and opened up in hundreds of theaters, which, again, wasn't done with movies. Movies had a gradual rollout, basically. And it was originally going to be in 900 theaters, and Lou Wasserman, who was one of the heads of Universal, cut that number down because he wanted lines around the block in all the theaters, because he thought that would be great for press.
And they got that anyway.
They definitely got that.
Those are some of the most incredible photos you'll see. It would be like the line to get in to see this one tonight, but everywhere.
And Variety for weeks was posting the grosses and how much bigger they got and bigger they got. I mean, and then this was followed. It was the #1 movie of all time for 2 years until Star Wars came out, also in the summer.
It's still amazing to think that this was prior to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Chronologically, it has to be, but it seems... There's so many movies that are like this, but this movie just still seems so unique. You know, when you watch... Every time I watch it, I see something new.
Yeah.
A scene that I thought even went differently than it does. It's not a cookie cutter at all. There's nothing been there, done that about it.
No, it's a tiny little character detail, something going on in the background. This is the first time I noticed when they're on the ferry and they all surround Brody to kind of intimidate him. You can see his deputy, Hendricks, in the back, who kind of looks like he's grumbling about it and not happy with the whole situation.
I love that whole scene. Take us back.
And just the subtle intimidation where they're backing him into a corner on a boat, which, they must know by now he doesn't like being on, and he's just grabbing the rails and just trying to back away from them. But, I mean, after this, that was it. We'd have the summer blockbuster as we know it. Unfortunately, most of them aren't as smart or as well put together as this. But
nope. Every once in a while you get a Planet of the Apes or a...
But love it or hate it, this is the movie that pretty much kicked that off. Okay, so, what's everybody's favorite scene from the movie?
I have a couple. I like, obviously, the scene when he shoots it and has his moment to shine and says, "Smile, you son of a bitch." I thought that was awesome. I actually like the scene when Hooper is doing his whole science spiel about the shark and he's looking at her remnants.
It indicates the non-frenzied feeding of a large squalus, possibly Angimanus or Asurus glaucus. Now, the enormous amount of tissue loss prevents any detailed analysis. However, the attacking squalus must be considerably larger than any normal squalus found in these waters.
Give me a glass of water.
And then the scene when he's actually taking the stuff out of the shark.
And the autopsy scene was originally longer, too, but they had to cut that down. I think it was a little too gory. I love his little, do not smoke in here, thank you very much. Goes right back into his spiel.
And that scene is a perfect correlation to the rest of the movie, the less is more mentality. We do not see what he's looking at, aside from the hand that we've already been shown. And by him explaining it, it's like, that's fucking gruesome.
Yeah, it's horrible, the idea.
He picks it up, though, at one point, doesn't he?
Just the hand,
just the arm,
which we've already seen. Yeah. That's so it's always that we don't see quite what happened to her. You know what I mean?
The one problem is I can't watch that scene without thinking of the Saturday Night Live parody they did for this with the land shark and John Belushi playing Hooper going, "Oh my God, what is it? Egg salad again," and pulls out a sandwich.
And it kind of gets you when they open the thing in it because you never really know how much of it was left.
Yeah.
So when they pull out this little plastic thing in, you're like,
oh yeah,
it's left.
And to know
that we can only tell
stopped you for a second because you were expecting like a full person, and
they take it out of like almost like a college mini fridge, and you know, and it's he's such the straight man in that scene, but he delivers comic relief again in the way he reacts to things. But you get that little bit of, judging by the remains, we could assume that she was like 6 foot whatever, and this is like, man, the character's so good at his job, and that's the other thing you get out of Hooper. He's just, when he's in his element, he's just in his element.
Yeah, he has that moment of like loses his breath for the second looking at it, and then goes right back into his scientific mode and diagnosing it and listing off the kind of sharks it could be. The fact that when they catch this other shark, his first reaction is to go right up to it, start measuring the mouth.
Yep. Yeah.
That he's always thinking scientifically.
So me, I look at things technically, especially from a cinematography standpoint. But my favorite scene, just like this is my favorite movie of all time. I wouldn't call it the best movie I've ever seen, but it is definitely my favorite movie of all time. My favorite scene is Quint's initial show up in the movie. It's just great. That everyone arguing, the nails on the chalkboard, his entire spiel there.
But it's not going to be pleasant. I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. You gotta make up your minds. You wanna stay alive and ante up? You wanna play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter.
Coupled with his USS Indianapolis speech are my 2 favorite scenes in the movie. But my favorite shots in the movie all have to do with Quint on the front deck of the boat, with the sunset behind him and the smirking smile of just, they're panicking still. And he's just kind of standing there like, I could die right now. I could die right now because this is what I do, and I'm going to hunt this son of a bitch, and this is it. They're not even there to him. And it all shows up in that one shot. And to have a third, the way they filmed that boat has so much character. We talk about the DeLorean and Back to the Future having character. That boat just being the old beat up, man, this boat's seen some shit. Just like Quint. The fact that to get to the front of the fucking boat, you have to step on this little 4-inch piece of wood, and they film that with the camera right down on it while the shark is right there.
And the feet are slipping
every time they went. Brody in his freaking moccasins or his puddle jumping boots. And it's
rubbers.
Yeah, the rubbers. It's just that those are the kinds of things I look at, and they're just all over the place.
Or the golden set of jaws are in the front,
right,
like another trophy. Or just the way the boat is constructed to have the barrels be able to pop right off whenever he shoots one. That he has this set procedure for hunting sharks. That God knows how many he's killed off this boat.
That's my take on that.
For me, it used to be the scene where Quint's attacked by the shark, because that's the big payoff moment where the shark, finally we get to see it really in full doing its thing. And it's horrible. And the little irony that the thing that kills it, the air tank, is also what kills Quint, because he's grabbing on, it rolls on his fingers and he loses his grip. Or that the...
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, or that the machete that he puts into the side of the boat when they're about to cut the lines comes back into play. You can see him grab it and start hacking at the shark uselessly.
I missed him grabbing. I didn't know what he was stabbing at. I didn't realize it was that.
But the more I watch the movie, it's the Indianapolis speech. Especially coming after they have this great joyous scene of them, comparing scars, and it's all fun. And Brody makes the mistake of asking what that one was. And once he says Indianapolis, Hooper's face just falls because he knows what it means. And as he's going to this story, he still has this weird little kind of comic smirk, and he's saying it with this kind of gentle, isn't this kind of funny tone to it. And as the scene goes on, that disappears more and more, and we see how grim he gets and how much this is affected him and shaped his character into this hunter of animals that he
never
is.
wear a life jacket again after that day, and it's like, wow.
And
shit.
When you think back to his shack with all these shark jaws all over the place, you realize what motivates that. What has brought him to this point where he just kills these things everywhere.
Mercilessly.
Yeah.
You know the thing about a shark? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then... Oh, then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
And then right after that, you get right back into them doing the sing-along again.
Right.
It's this odd kind of mood dip in the scene, but that speech, just the way he delivers it. For a while, when I used to work at a video store, if I got bored, I'd slip into Quint mode, and I had that speech memorized, and every once in a while, I'd find myself saying it. It was a little strange. It scared some of the customers every once in a while.
Sure.
Okay, for recommendations, if you didn't like the movie, recommend something that people might like instead. If you did like the movie, which I can assume we all did, what's something you'd recommend that's kind of similar?
Well, first off, after seeing it for the first time in a movie theater, I implore anyone that listens to this to find a place that is playing Jaws and see it on the big screen. It's the only way to see it. No matter of big screen TV or great gloss over, even if it's an old print, see it on the big screen. As far as other recommendations, we've kind of gone over most of them. You know, I'd recommend you got to see Jurassic Park. They'd make a great double feature. Stick Lake Placid in the middle of it, have some fun. Even though the movie is pretty god-awful, for a lesser version of this, it's always really silly to have a few beers and watch Deep Blue Sea. And Sharknado, of course. Throw one out there, any iteration, especially the original Moby Dick.
Yep.
You know, it has a lot of that same, you know, Quint doesn't quite get as, you know, crazy as Ahab, but it's all there in his character.
Which is funny because Spielberg originally wanted to introduce Quint watching Moby Dick in a movie theater and laughing at how inaccurate it was. And the only reason he couldn't is Gregory Peck objected, not because he didn't like the idea, because Peck hated his performance in that movie.
Really?
And didn't want it seen again.
Really?
So I think Quint's introduction to the movie works better anyway. Sarah, how about you?
Tremors, like he said, we pretty much named them all. The Tremors, Jurassic Park, Godzilla, you...
Oh, yes. Yeah. Actually, she brings up a good point for a recommendation. The new Godzilla film, which hopefully everyone listening to this has seen because it deserves your money over most of the other things that came out this summer, is so much of an homage to this movie in tone and in pacing that, you know, they decided to name the main family Brody.
Which reminds me, that's the name of one of the characters for Kevin Smith, is it Mallrats?
Yes.
Yep. And he actually recreates the scar scene in Chasing Amy with a slightly more risque version of it.
What about King Kong?
King Kong's another really good one, yeah. Any version. Oh, preferably not the 70s one, but...
When the monkey die, everybody gonna cry.
Which was also, I think, partially inspired by this movie. That was 1976, so it was already in production, but I think the way they promoted that movie came out something from this one.
You have to specify which Godzilla they have to see.
Yes, not, if Steve Brennan is listening to this, the one with Matthew Broderick. That did not exist. Shit, actually it did.
We do not speak of that film.
We do not accept your outside viewpoints here.
Film that will not be named.
Yes. I
hate such retards. It is not precious.
A couple I can think of. We've already mentioned Duel, which, I mean, if you haven't seen it anyway, is just an amazing
Duel is
suspense.
Jaws on land.
Yeah, I mean, the lead character there is very Brody-like in that he's this everyman who's suddenly forced to come up against something and prove his worth in fighting it. And the fact in that movie, we never see the truck driver who's chasing him, just this giant beastly truck that becomes this monster chasing him. Especially in the later half where it becomes this full chase movie, reminds me of the shark chasing the boat in this film.
Yes.
Another one I caught on Netflix recently is a movie called The Reef. Have you heard of that one?
Oh, yeah, I've seen it. It's great.
Yeah, that one is incredibly tense, about a boat that capsizes, and the survivors have to decide if they should wait on the capsized boat for help or try to swim off to this nearby reef. And the ones who try swimming get chased by this one really nasty great white shark, which is filmed. There's no effects. It's all actual live shark footage, but the way it's cut together is incredibly edgy.
Yeah, it was intense.
And, of course, Open Water, another recent
Open Water is a great one.
Which is amazing just for the way it was filmed and the low budget. Another one that really doesn't make you ever want to scuba dive or go anywhere near the water.
Open Water just reminds me of The Ruins for some reason. And I love The Ruins.
I can see that. That same
There's just
sense
something about the get more than you bargained for kind of situation.
Snakes on a plane.
Snakes on a motherfucking plane. And Alien.
Yep. Alien bars a little
These
bit too.
motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane. Or the edited version.
I'm tired of these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane.
But that Ruins comparison also reminds me of the latter half of this movie where once the boat runs down, the engine's broken, and they're trapped. It's that same situation of, okay, now we're stuck here with this incredibly nasty threat. How do we deal with it?
And that, the movie's iconic enough, right? The orca's iconic, the shark's iconic. I never realized it till right now, but when Brody gets that gun strapped to him and is climbing up, he just looks like Ash. And the color scheme, it just something about it, right? This is my boomstick is all I could think of this time watching it.
Well, there's also that just much beleaguered quality that he shares with Ash.
That's right.
Another great little detail I noticed that I'd never before, after the boat's run down and starting to sink, and Quint has that moment where he walks in and looks at the life preservers and walks out and throws them to the guys, I noticed he's all of a sudden, his shirt is buttoned, he's kind of looks like he's straightened himself up.
Yeah.
And which leads to this moment where he finally has to admit defeat and ask Cooper, okay, well, what can you do with these things of yours? That he has to acknowledge he's lost control of the situation and has to rely on Hooper to try and bail them out.
But he's, straight-laced, the captain has cleaned himself out, and he's going to come out and he's relinquishing command. And
yes, he
it's
wants
a changing of the guard.
He wants to do it with dignity.
And I forget the whole scene, but when the ship was starting to fill with water, you knew it would eventually sink, that he's standing, like you're looking at his back, and it's almost like he's preparing himself to go down with the ship.
Yeah, there's that
Or
one...
to go meet his friends.
That one shot where he's looking around at the boat kind of settling with this kind of horror of this is actually happening. I may not make it out of this one, which seems like it never occurred to him since the Indianapolis incident.
Well, and even with the, when he's talking about the money at the beginning of the movie, he has this reaction of, this is just what I do. Do you know what it's going to be hard, but it's what I do. It's like, to you people, you've got a problem. To me, this is just another outing. And it's great. I love, we could talk about Quint all day long, but when they meet him in his shop, where he's bleaching the bones and whatever else he's doing in there, and with the bloody hand, he hands Brody the drink. Made this myself. You should try it. And then Hooper gets past. Don't drink that.
And you just hear Hooper's reaction, Mr. Quint! Yeah, that Quint is one of my all-time favorite movie characters. Just the way Shaw plays him, he is amazing.
Like they found a great white in the Cape.
Yeah, there's plenty of great whites down the Cape right now.
So
the
if you go
weekend
to
we
the
were
Cape,
there.
Swim at your own risk.
Have you seen the footage too of the damn thing? It looks straight out of like the way it is at the top of the water and everything. It's just going by a boat with a bunch of tourists on it filming it.
Oh, that's creepy.
And it's just not right at all. In honor of our good friend Quint, I've been drinking Narragansett the whole time.
Alas, I don't have a paper cup.
Exactly.
Alright, so I think that about wraps it up, unless anybody has anything else.
I gave my last thought. Swim at your own risk.
Nice.
Nice. Alright, that ends our conversation, but not the discussion. If you'd like to have your say about Jaws, or feel we missed something, check out the comment section for this episode on cinemaspection.blogspot.com and start talking. You can also email your comments, complaints, questions, and suggestions to cinemaspection@gmail.com. We've also started a Facebook page, so you can like us on there as well. If you're on iTunes and like what you hear, please subscribe to us, and if you have a moment to spare, leave us a review. We appreciate any feedback you can offer. We'll be back to discuss another movie next time. Until then, remember to keep watching closely. There's more to a movie than just what's on the screen. Bye now.
Bye.